workshop is on pandemic and emotional configuration. As we know, literary responses across time and space, organized by Internal Quality Assurance Cell IQAC and Department of English, SSM College, Dinanagar, with all the sincere efforts of our worthy principal, Dr. R.K. Tuli, and the technical team of Professor Amit Ji and organizing secretary, our worthy Dr. Jai Singh Ji. I am thankful to all of you. And now it's a time to introduce you people for the very first speaker of today's workshop, that is on 24th of April, and the first session, that is our Dr. Komal Prasad Fuel. I am very thankful to ma'am. I have no words from the core of my heart that you have joined this e-workshop from your busy schedule, ma'am. Dr. Komal Prasad, please give a big hand on this virtual platform.
Prabodh ji, Komal Fuel is a man.
Male, sir.
Okay. Dr. Komal Prasad.
Namaskar.
Well, thank you, sir.
Namaskar.
Thank you. Sorry for this.
I'm present here.
Major
Am I audible?
yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Okay. Lecture in English.
Okay.
Dr.
I don't
Komal
have
is
any
lecturer in
PowerPoint
English,
presentation, so I'll make my oral
Central
presentation in
Department of
this
English,
session.
Tribhuvan University, Kirtipur, Kathmandu, Nepal. She is Dr. Komal is really a man of great academic qualifications, and she has served many academic institutions. That is from 2004 to 2011. She is Sainik Avasya Mahavidyalaya, formerly known as Brindra Sainik Campus, and his PhD in Nepali modernism and backdrop of South Asian modernity. Nepali modernity in backdrop of South Asian modernity. That is their PhD thesis, and he is also French writer, translator, interpreter, postgraduate teacher, lecturer in English at Lalit Kala campus, Tribhuvan University from 2012 and 2016. There is a teaching English literature, critical theory, critical thinking, Nepal studies, academic writings, South Asian studies, and so on. He has a number of list of what we can say scholarly writings to his credit during his tenure. Without wasting any time, I hand over the mic to this virtual platform to Dr. Komal Prasad. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor, for this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Prabodh Chandraji.
Yes, myself, Professor Grover,
Thank you,
sir.
Professor.
Okay. Yes, sir. We are eagerly waiting for your. Okay.
The floor is mine, right?
Thank you. Thank
Do you
you.
want to share screen, Komal ji?
I think there are connectivity issues, and the thing are not as audible as they should be. And
No, you are audible.
am I
You are
audible
audible.
to you all?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
You are audible.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm not going to make any PowerPoint presentation. I'll be giving my oral presentation, oral talk on the title "Reflection on Humanity in Crisis: Consumption and Old War in Modern Nepali Literature." Because we are in the time of pandemic, and it has paralyzed us heavily we should be talking about, we should be thinking about how it has left certain kind of impact in our life, in our social life, in our individual life, in our political life. And I thank you, organizers, for this beautiful opportunity to respond to this thing from my location, from Nepali literature. So how I see this thing is humanity has undergone multiple crises across time and places, along with evolution of organized human settlement and polity. And generally, human assumptions are, as we think that human assumptions are rational. Generally, we believe that human assumptions take rational course of action. But there also we see certain kind of errors in our political assumptions about humanity, about human society, about organized society, like polity, like state. And states can have certain type of misunderstanding in themselves, and such misunderstandings require, actually they lead to military intervention, and that is something we call war. So war is something we create, or war appears as a result of our errors in our assumptions, human assumptions. And there are microorganisms like viruses and bacteria that have also troubled us for a long time. Microorganisms have become the source of human trouble in the course of human history, human evolution. So on the one hand, human beings also face natural microorganisms like bacteria or viruses leading to global crisis. On the other hand, we have got wars. So humanity has confronted such tensions resulting from such disasters. Such concerns of crisis have turned into subject of contemplation for Nepali literary geniuses in the 1960s. And in Nepali literature, you can find such issues being raised in the earlier times, like in 19th century. There were people thinking about such issues and responding to them in literature. But in my talk, I'll be focused on Shirishko Phul by Parijat, and Shirishko Phul in Nepali can be translated as jacaranda flower, though it's famously translated as blue mimosa. That was a text written in 1964, and BP Koirala, who is our first democratically elected prime minister, has written another text, another novella, Narendra Dai, in 1964, when he was put in jail by King Mahendra. So in this talk, I'll be examining the reflection on human crisis in Nepali literature by looking at the impacts of old war as manifest in Parijat, while I also analyze Koirala's novella as a response to pandemic. Now we have got the pandemic of virus. In Koirala's novel, we can find him responding to the pandemic caused by bacteria, that is consumption, tuberculosis in his time. Both the novels present women as the major victim of humanity in crisis. Human beings suffer for both conditions. Still, in both conditions, still they display high courage and sense of moral integrity to fight against the critical situation in their life. So, on the one hand, you can say that both Parijat, Vishnu Kumari Waiba, her pen name is Parijat, and Visheshwar Prasad Koirala are democratically elected first prime minister of this country. Both these authors look at the pandemic and they say that we are supposed to fight against such complex situations with moral courage and moral integrity. Historically talking about the contemplation on pandemic, we can look at things like hymns, Newar hymns. Kathmandu is a valley, the capital city, largely inhabited by Newars. And these Newars, even today, though I come from Brahmin family, and because I have grown up among the Newars of Kathmandu, I can understand some of their languages and some of their cultural practices also. So in the evening, they gather at public places and they begin to sing the song of Shitala Maju. Shitala Maju is goddess Shitala, who takes care of, as Newari people believe, Shitala Maju takes care of smallpox, and that's a pandemic caused by virus. So historically, the Newars of Kathmandu Valley sing the hymns of Shitala Maju as a creative response to the pandemic in the that occurred in the early 19th century. At the time, King Ranabadur Saha, who is the grandson of King Prithvinarayan Saha, the founder of modern Nepal, was ruling in Kathmandu, and his favorite queen Kantibati had given birth to a prince, Girmajidda Bikram Saha, and Queen Kantibati had also was also infected with the virus, but she defeated the virus, and nothing untoward happened to her. But king was afraid. The king was afraid that the prince might be infected with the virus. So the king issued a decree to drive away the infected children from the Kathmandu Valley, and all of these infected children were driven away from Kathmandu Valley to the far river. You know, in Dolakha district, we have a river called Tamakoshi, and they were driven to the other side of Tamakoshi, and many of the children died on the way to Tamakoshi. So these smallpox infected children were dead still. They were not, the state would not allow them to give them proper burial to this side of Tamakoshi, because the king wanted to keep his son safe from the pandemic. And even though the king inflicted a lot of torture and atrocities on the common people, the king could not save his son. In 1816, Girmajidda Bikram Saha died of smallpox, and this led to the creation of these hymns of Shitala Maju. And in the hymns of Shitala Maju, the people of Kathmandu Valley, the Newars of Kathmandu Valley, gathered together and they sing a beautiful song of the goddess Shitala in praise of goddess Shitala, and they plead Shitala not to give them any more smallpox, because of smallpox they cannot live in their house. They have to go away from their settlement. Their children cannot get proper burial because of the smallpox. And the king is atrocious, and they cannot find any kind of mercy in the land. So they ask the heavenly being, super being, goddess, to give them this sort of blessing, and they want the goddess to remove away the impact of virus in their life, in their children, in their settlement. So this is a very beautiful response, and I had recently carried out a research on this aspect of pandemic. So I'm very glad that I could share this thing with you all. In 1936, modern Nepali poet Lakshmi Prasad Devkota had written Muna Madan. Muna Madan is based on, again, a folk ballad of Newari people. And in this ballad also, the hero goes to Lhasa, Tibet, in search of wealth, and the hero suffers from cholera while returning home. And his friends are afraid that they might contract cholera. So they leave him in the middle of the path, and they come home with, they assume that he is dead there. So they send a message to his family that he is dead. And because his young wife could not properly receive the message. She dies after hearing that her husband is dead, and his mother also has a deep shock, and the mother, who was 60 plus, was almost dead when he reaches home after recovering from cholera on the way to Nepal. So this is another response to pandemic, and you could really say that poet Lakshmi Prasad Devkota was trying to address to the impact of microorganism in our life. Similarly, in 1996, Madhav Prasad Ghimire wrote a lyrical epic called Aswasthama, and this text, Aswasthama, is constructed around the classical myth from the Mahabharata, in which Dronacharya's son Aswasthama becomes the last commander of Kauravas in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he uses the Brahmastra, Agnyastra. So super weapons are used there. And to Madhav Prasad Ghimire, this myth becomes very interesting, because this myth presents a plagued hero. It presents a plague hero who chronically suffers from the classical sin of using Brahmastra in Kurukshetra. Ghimire critiques the threat of using nuclear power in global context. He is thinking about a possibility of Third World War after the end of Cold War in 1990. And he critiques this thing. The creative literary response helps understand the nature of suffering of humanity because of disaster that humanity had to undergo in various periods of time in history. With this much of setting context, I take you all this scholarly gathering to the text that I'm going to talk about in my presentation now. 1964 is such an important date for us in Nepali history that we got two wonderful, amazing novellas. One from Vishweshwar Prasad Koirala. Vishweshwar Prasad Koirala is our democratically elected first prime minister of this nation, Nepal, and he was put in prison some 18 kilometers away from Simha Darbar, the headquarters of Nepal government. In Sundarijal, he was put in prison in 1960 after King Mahendra had coup. So with this military coup, he was removed from power and he was placed there. So this is one type of predicament, human disaster, resulting from political ambition of the king. And in his solitary days, BP Koirala, Vishweshwar Prasad Koirala, popularly known as Koirala, BP Koirala, he begins to ponder about predicament, human predicament in his own life in past or where he had seen those things. So he weaves a very beautiful tale in Narendra Dai, bringing all the references from his life, his childhood. Vishweshwar Prasad Koirala was born in 1914 in Banaras. Koirala family, the great Koirala family was there in Banaras, and he begins to weave a story from the incidents that he had seen in his life from 1920s to 1935 come in this story as the major happenings, major elements of the book. Critically observing the human condition at present, we find that pandemics are not unique phenomena. They have occurred in history repeatedly. The most significant aspect of this phenomena centers on the ways our society has responded to it. In this talk, I take two novels from the 1960s, BP Koirala's 1964 novel, Narendra Dai, that was published in 1970, and Parijat's 1964 novel, Shirisko Phul, Blue Jacaranda Flowers. And Kathmandu is fully in bloom with those blue flowers. Because of difficult situation of pandemic, I have not been able to see.
Hello?
Am I audible? Hello? Jaiji, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, Komalji.
Okay. I was disconnected for a while, for a second. So Kathmandu is all in bloom with those blue flowers, those blue jacaranda flowers now. And Parijat takes this motif, this as a symbol to contemplate on the situation of transitory nature of human life in our novel. Generally read as existential literature from Nepal. Both the texts are generally taken as existential literature from Nepal. And in the University of Maryland, this Shirisko Phul was taught as blue mimosa for a long time as existential literature from Nepal. Both the texts deal with human predicament amid crisis in humanity. Pandemics caused by microorganisms have simultaneously existed with humanity. In the various jolts of history, bacteria or virus has troubled humanity on and off. Similarly, errors in political imaginations have resulted in war. And in Shirisko Phul by Parijat, we see Second World War and its impact heavily embedded in the protagonist called Suyogir. Two great wars of the 20th century present before us the quick examples of its devastation. Koirala and Parijat have reflected on the issues of critical phases that human beings had to go through because of bacterial infections like tuberculosis in TB in Narendra Dai and Old War, as you can see in Suyogbir later on. B.P. Koirala was born in 1914 and he died in 1982. And in his in this lifetime, he achieved the greatest feat of this nation, and he was part of Swaraj movement in India, and Ramon or Lohiya kind of people under the patronage of Ramon or Lohiya kind of people. He was brought up and he had political ideals of Gandhi as well. So in this text also, he models the hero who is Gandhi's Bande, Gandhi's man. So Gandhi's influence is high there in this hero. He was the first democratically elected Prime Minister of Nepal, and Koirala was a successful revolutionary in 1950. He was imprisoned after King Mahendra took over the executive power of the nation, and he was put in Sundarijal in 1960. In his most pensive years of imprisonment, he wrote Narendra Dai as reflection on human fate at the hand of external forces like political whims, bacteria, or earthquake. He goes back to his childhood to narrate the triangular love between among Narendra and Munariya, Gauri and Narendra, and then Gauri, Munariya, and Narendra. Educated in liberal values in Kolkata. Narendra Dai was educated in liberal values in Kolkata, while BP Koirala was educated in Banaras and Patna. Narendra comes home and fights with the rigid feudal order and its values. The children are afraid of him. At this point, it is relevant to claim that the narrator, Sanu Babu, is BP Koirala himself, because the author accepts the narrative itself as semi-autobiographical. The young Koirala runs away from Narendra Dai because the child shares the opinion of the society about Narendra, and Narendra is taken as a challenge in the rigid traditional feudal order. Narendra does not have any good relationship with his wife Gauri because he believes that she has got underdeveloped body. Narendra and his father, who is feudal lord of the area, and he is also known by the title Captain Ba, Captain Father, fights over the issue. Narendra says, "Father, if you are so very interested in Gauri, you keep Gauri. I'm not going to accept Gauri as my wife." This escalates the misunderstanding between father and son, and they are never in good terms until the father dies. Narendra does not believe in caste system, as I earlier told you about his influence from Gandhi. And he is deeply influenced by Gandhi. His mother begins to see him as a challenge to the orthodox social values, for he shows no respect to untouchability as a social institution. And even those people who are from cobbler class, they are supposed to be untouchable in our, in Brahmin caste hierarchy in Nepal. So he allows them to take water from his well, and he falls in love with the daughter of Dhanuk. Dhanuk is also a very lower one in caste hierarchy. He loves a maidservant, Munaria, and goes to forest to consummate his love with her. And the whole family knows about this thing. And he is so open about his relationship with Munaria in the family. This leads to serious kind of misunderstanding between the mother and the son. And he leaves house taking Munaria with him, because as per the tradition of the Tarai region in Nepal, Munaria had chumon, means this is initial kisses. So she was kissed. Such kisses are also, it's something like engagement. Engagement was done, but ornament was not offered by her prospective husband. And when Narendra Dai comes to know that her prospective husband is going to come there with ornament, he runs away with his beloved Munaria. So actually, leaving the orthodox feudal order behind, leaving the Brahminical order behind, he runs away from Biratnagar to Kathmandu. He runs away from Biratnagar to Kathmandu, and he stays there. And to his relatives, he introduces his girl as his wife, rightful wife. This man, who is supposed to be a great social reformer, is infected with TB, consumption, tuberculosis, and he moves to Banaras from Kathmandu. And in Banaras, he suffers a lot. He suffers like anything, and he does not find any economic resources to support his life there in Banaras. So actually, you see, the love between Munaria and Narendra could not fully materialize there in Banaras. Because of this pandemic, in the 1920s, there was huge pandemic of consumption in this part of the world. In Nepal and India, you could find many people suffering from TB. And even today, here in Kathmandu, every year we have got more than 45,000 cases every year. So TB is a global pandemic even today, though we do not properly pay attention to this thing and we do not talk about this thing, many people are losing life because of TB, and our hero, our protagonist, Narendra, also suffers from TB. The love between Munaria and Narendra could not fully materialize in the form of a family or home because of serious disease like consumption. The silent victim of the whole scene is Gauri as well. Gauri is Narendra's wife, who is left in Biratnagar. Gauri lives in Biratnagar, and lives in Biratnagar, and she silently waits for things to happen. She does not take any initiation for things to happen. She is so helpless. The whole story in Narendra Rai takes place between 1920 and 1935, since Koirala derives the events from his memory during his solitary days in prison in Sundarachal. After Narendra thinks that he does not have any resources to support his life in Banaras, he begins to think about Gauri and his village and Koshi River and all those things that he had enjoyed during his childhood. So he talks to Munaria about coming home back, and one day he moves to Biratnagar and he comes home, and there he dies a very pathetic death. He suffers from consumption, and Gauri takes care of him. But finally, he comes to see Gauri before he dies. He spends some days with Gauri before he dies. After Narendra dies of consumption, Gauri leaves Biratnagar and moves to her parents' place in Birganj, where she dies in the great earthquake of 1934. So people move from one place to another place. People move from one issue to another issue, one disaster to another disaster. In the beginning, the rigid social structure is something that troubles the people. And those people who were deeply influenced by the liberal values of Gandhian philosophy suffer like anything. And such people could not materialize their love. They are fighting, they are moving from Biratnagar to Kathmandu to Banaras to seek out happiness, to in pursuit of happiness. They are moving from one location to another location. But they cannot really institute a family. And this pandemic of tuberculosis, TB, is something that hampers them terribly, and they lose everything. Total disintegration is there, and a pathetic scene is something you find at the end of human life. It's because of pandemic, it's because of natural disaster like the earthquake of 1934, which is popularly known as Nabbe Saal Ko Bhuichalo in Nepal. So Gauri dies in 1934. That's one aspect. That's there you can find pandemic directly being reflected on by great novelist Visheshwar Prasad Koirala. And here in actually all the characters move around the disaster in the novel, fighting against those disasters and losing their life. The choices of the people, the choices of the society are blocked because free will is something that cannot flourish in the time of disaster. So this is the free will of human beings cannot really function in the time of disaster. In the time of critical time of humanity in crisis. So Visheshwar Prasad Koirala contemplates on human fate during pandemic in Narendra Rai, written in 1960. Another 1964 novel, Nepali novel, is Shirish Kapul, in which Parijat creates very terrifying image of hero. Parijat brings a war veteran from the Second World War. And this man is Suyogbir, who has fought in the Second World War in Burma against the Japanese, and where he used women like anything. He used to drive. Suyogbir used to enjoy the women's body and kick them in the end. So using them for physical pleasure and kicking them in the end is something that holds two contradictory attitudes in it. So that is to say, to him, enjoying a woman's body and kicking them in the end are both normal and regular while in Burma. But to the people, Parijat is narrating the story, they find it very strange because he is not behaving normally. So war robs away normality, war robs away the reasoning, the critical sensibility, the sense of justice, and she creates a beastly hero in Suyogbir. He comes to Kathmandu and be friends with Shivaraj. In the evening, they go to the pub together, they drink together, they are friends, and they cycle around the city together. As a friend, he visits Shiva's house where his sister Sakambari draws his attention. And Suyogbir has got only one problem. The problem is that he cannot resist the presence of beautiful and attractive woman. Though Sakambari smokes heavily and she does not entertain the talks about those normal things, those regular things, quotidian things, usual things, she begins to think about the society and life and human existence in a completely different way. This beastly hero is really fascinated by her presence. He wants to use her body. He wants her body for his pleasure. Actually, he wants her. Parijat contemplates on the spiritual plague that has gnawed humanity from within, and she argues that human crises have resulted from the Second World War. In 1960s, Vishweshwar Prasad Koirala has a very different line of thought, and he thinks that the crisis of humanity in Nepal in 1960s results from very different kind of things. Very, the political misunderstanding between the democratic ruler and the king. Here we have got Parijat making a different political claims, who says that Second World War or the colonial presence in South India or South Asia or India is something that has led to this crisis. Sakambari is determined to, Parijat's heroine, Sakambari is determined to live a pure life because she understands that life is transitory, life is short-lived. So she does not want anyone to use her life, use her body. This is something very interesting in her. Sakambari is determined to live a pure life because she understands that life is transitory by nature. Just like the blue jacaranda flowers that have bloomed in this season in Kathmandu, she wants to live the life without any hornet or bee sucking the nectar from it. She says, if one has to die, why die after being sucked off its nectar by a hornet or a bee? The blue flowers are short-lived and they are attractive. Suyogbir understands life differently because he was effect of colonial rule in South Asia. Suyogbir was used in the war and he was used like an instrument. He seeks utility in everything. He wants Sakambari. One day, he goes to Shivaraj's house and praises his sister. Sakambari is here. And next day, when he reaches there, Sakambari has saved her hair. And her hair is just like that of a Buddhist nun. The tension between Suyog and Sakambari reaches the climax when she completely rejects him by rejecting the skin that he has touched. One day, when there were nobody in the house except Sakambari and Suyog kisses Sakambari, and Sakambari completely rejects her body. She's tossed by the people, tossed by Suyog, and she commits suicide. So, in both the texts, Narendra Dai and this text called Shiriskopul, we see the end of protagonist in death. In Narendra Dai, both Narendra Dai and Gauri Bauju die in the end. Gauri Bauju dies very unnatural death in the great earthquake of 1934. Narendra Dai dies of tuberculosis, and in Shiriskopul, Sakambari commits suicide. But these deaths occur because of unnatural, because of the tension between human and nature. People could not understand those disasters. The nature of disaster is something that we could not understand, and we have suffered in history. The human crisis brought about by pandemic of tuberculosis is something very interesting for Vishweswar Prasad Koirala to contemplate on his own faith. And the effect, the plague, spiritual plague generated out of the Second World War is something that creates helpless state of human beings in Shiriskopul. So both these texts talk about respond to the crisis faced by humanity in different form. One is the crisis brought about because of the errors in human reasoning, and another is the crisis brought about because of the microorganisms like bacteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Komal. Everybody is listening to me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Really a nice historical experience of South Asian you have told people of this workshop today. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. You have elaborated the idea of what we can say of the Lohia Hospital, Ram Manohar Lohia, the contribution.
Ram Manohar Lohia, yes.
Yes, a very nice idea I have picked up. Remember the old history of India also, how he has contributed. And secondly, every epidemic has the effect of microorganism on very life of the globe. And that is not a single person, the whole humanity has suffered. And Almighty God will definitely, with the optimistic view, we will find out the solutions very soon in this COVID-19 also. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for the inspiration in this workshop for the South Asian literature and Nepali literature from your side. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to me for 1 hour.
Thank you. And now we have our second speaker.
Within a few minutes, our second speaker was joined us.
May I introduce our second speaker to our worthy guest?
Sir, second speaker has not yet joined.
Okay.
So time is 11, so he will join at around 11 only.
Oh, okay.
So till then,
sir.
I want to share something. All the friends who have joined the meeting, let me share it. So, dear friends, you can see this, brochure overlapping of Aryavrata and Ramayana, Parikrama across South Asia, interpretive exegesis of both circles
Okay,
across
sir.
time and space. So we are organizing this conference in collaboration with Bharatiya Shikshan Mandal at PCMSD College, Jalandhar. In this
Right.
conference, Manya Mukul Kanitkar ji, who is Sangathan Mantri of BSM, Bharatiya Shikshan Mandal, will be the keynote speaker. And Manya Shiksha Mantri ji, Ramesh Pokhriyal ji has also given his consent in principle. And then we have a luminary of speakers in this conference from India and abroad. So I request all of you to present papers in this conference, though the brochure is in English, but you can present your papers in English, Hindi, Punjabi, whichever language you want. And if you submit your full papers by 5th May, your papers will be published. Otherwise, you can simply present your papers. The reason is, in the inaugural session of the conference, we will release the book. The book that for the Vedic conference that was held last year, many people from the people who have joined this workshop also presented papers in that workshop. So the proceedings of that Vedic conference will be published, and the papers for this conference, Ramayana conference, will also be published. So there will be 2 books. The 2 books will be released, one from the Vedic literature and one from the Ramayana literature. So you can submit your papers in Hindi as well as English. No other Indian language, because the publisher does not have the fonts for other languages. So the papers will be accepted in Hindi and English. But when it comes to presentation, you can present your papers in English, Hindi, Punjabi. 3 languages are acceptable. So if you just want to present paper, the registration last date to register for the conference is 13th May. Of course, we will accept on the 14th as well, because the conference starts on 15th. And the conference fees is 500 rupees. Last date to pay registration fees is 14th May. And this is the link. You can submit your papers, your abstracts, your titles through this link. And if you have any question or any doubt regarding this conference, you can unmute and you can ask a question to me. I hope many of you will present papers. And in API score, as it is international conference in India, so it carries 5 marks.
Thank you, sir. You have shared a valuable information for the viewers, so that they will submit their paper well in time and prepare the paper in English or in Hindi. That's very important, you have told. And that's why I'm repeating this one, your wording, because the time is there for us for this talk also. And we can represent in any language, English, Punjabi, or Hindi, out of the 3 languages. But we can write the paper in English and Hindi.
Yes.
Right, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I also convey this message to all my colleagues also.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that
we want to make it a great success.
It is all the efforts from your side last time.
Yeah.
And this year also you are doing the excellent work. Even
that was the first online conference.
Okay.
From that only, many people got inspiration, and after that you see so many conferences
right.
organized.
It was a good initiative last year, and now the journey is there. A long journey for this one. Today in the history of novel literature, I also remember some names, sir. Rudyard Kipling in the English literature.
Yeah.
He was a Nobel Prize winner, on this day also for this contribution. He was selected for this one. John T.S. Eliot and Albert Campus.
First two Nobel laureates were born in India.
Okay,
So
okay.
English is a language of England, but first two Nobel laureates of English literature were born in India.
Okay.
The first one was Rudyard Kipling. He was born in India.
Uh-huh.
And second was Rabindranath Tagore, who was an Indian born in India.
Mm-hmm.
Third one was also associated with India, W.B. Yeats.
Okay,
It was
okay.
W.B. Yeats who introduced Rabindranath Tagore to the Western world.
That
And
is
he was influenced by our, occult studies, Tantra Mantra, Bengali Tantra Mantra. You can say the Kala Jadoo of Bengal.
Jantar Mantra, yes. Kala Jadoo. Right.
So, Komalji, are you listening to, are you still there, Komalji?
Yes, yes, Jayji.
Yeah,
Still here.
Komalji, we are highly thankful to you for accepting our invitation and delivering such interesting talk. So we are highly thankful to you, and I wish we will have more collaboration in future. And I request you to submit your paper for this international conference on Ramayana as well, because last time also large number of people from your side took part in that conference and presented papers, and that was a wonderful experience. So this time
Sure,
also,
sure. Jayji, I'll be more than happy to participate in the
yeah,
conference. Please
yeah.
send
And
me the brochure
there
and
is
I'll
no
ask my students too.
and there is no registration fees for our friends from Nepal.
Thank you so much. Thank you
And
so
even
much for
if
this
10
kindness.
to 20 people join from Nepal, that will be means we will be highly thankful to you and your team. And why it is so important, because the oldest manuscript of Ramayana is retrieved not from India but from Nepal. So
Yeah.
you have more claim on Ramayana than us.
Oh, our Prime Minister, present Prime Minister, has more claim on Ramayana and Ayodhya both. So we'll be talking about those issues also.
Yeah. So
And
I will share it with
share
you.
you something,
Yeah.
Jayji, to share you something about Ayodhya. Just a week, last week, in the initiation of our present Prime Minister KP Sharma Oliji, they have erected Ram and Janaki's statue in Chiton, that is to the south of it's near Betia, Valmiki Tiger Reserve is there in the northern part of Sitamarhi. So Chiton is adjoining district, and they have declared new Ayodhya Puri. So Ramayana debate is very interesting, and we must have certain kind of discussion over this thing. Please send me the brochure.
Yes.
I'll be sharing this thing with my students also, and we'll be more than happy to participate in this conference.
I will share the brochure with you, and I request you to ensure maximum participation from your side.
Sure.
And there will be no registration fees for our friends from Nepal.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
There is no registration fees, and all the assistant professors, associate professors, and professors will be put as resource persons.
Okay.
And students, they will be as paper presenters.
Okay. That would be lovely.
So we will provide, resource person certificate to all the assistant professors, lecturers, associate professors, and professors.
Thank you. Surely we'll be having collaboration on and off.
Yeah.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Komal, for joining us and sparing valuable time with us for SSM College Dinanagar, for organizing and participating in this workshop. I am also thankful once again for Dr. Jai Singh for his encouraging support to me.
And Prabodhji, Dr. Shri from Bangladesh has not yet joined. today yeah, I got a message from him. He will join in a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dr.
till then,
Sharif.
till then we can have discussion with Komal ji.
Okay, okay. Dr. Sharif ji is Takina?
No, he has not yet joined. अभी डॉक्टर शरीफ ने ज्वाइन नहीं किया है, वो 5-6 मिनट में ज्वाइन करेंगे.
After 10 minutes.
5 मिनट मान लीजिए.
Okay, okay, okay. So, why not we will share again with Dr. Komal the experience from Nepal and how the contribution of
Prabhuji, you were talking to me about Ram Manohar Lohia hospital kind of thing earlier.
Yes,
That
please
is
tell us.
something I was thinking of sharing with you after the paper, after the presentation was over. Visheshwar Prasad Koirala's family had to shift to Banaras because of political reasons. They were not on good terms. And, this Koirala family is only such family who had to fight with Nehru family in India. And, they were very close friend of, in 1977,
Okay.
Chandrasekhar and Visheshwar Prasad Koirala were together when Indira Gandhi had vasectomy camp all over the nation in an emergency period, and they opposed the accidental vasectomy done on an unmarried man. So Chandrasekhar ji and BP Koirala ji were put together in prison by Indira Gandhi. So this is very interesting, how BP Koirala becomes part of Nepal and becomes part of Indian movement, both the movements together. And he is deeply influenced by the socialist ideas of Ram Manohar Lohia and Gandhi at the same time. So he brings those ideas, the non-violent philosophy and setting of a socialist nation, and he sets up a political party called Nepali Congress, and socialism is one of the ideals for agendas of Nepali Congress. So this sort of connection, and in his novel also, characters move from Kolkata to Biratnagar. Biratnagar is a town in eastern Nepal, and from Biratnagar to Birganj. Birganj is very close to Patna, and people from Birganj move to Betia. Betia is a town in I think that's in Bihar, and then his characters move from Kathmandu to Banaras. So this kind of South Asian connection is something that we find in BP Koirala, and BP Koirala becomes so very interesting. In the like manner, the whole colonial world having a certain kind of impact in Nepali soldier is very praiseworthy in Siris Kapoor kind of novels. So we have this sort of cross connections, and Prabodji was very right in pointing out this Ram Manohar Lohia's issue that I had raised in my presentation. Thank you so much for
Thank you for this
this.
political history. Thank you for this wonderful political history and connection with Indira Gandhi and the Nehru family. And thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. And Koirala ji, and for National Nepali Congress. Thank you. How the literature has done.
Amit ji, Professor Sharif has joined.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Namaskar, sir. Sharif ji, namaskar.
Once again,
Amit ji, co-host बनाइए उनको. सर आप co-host हैं, आप unmute कर सकते हैं. Sir, Professor Sharif, you are co-host. You can unmute yourself.
hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are audible.
May I introduce Mr. Sharif, Professor
Yes,
Sharif?
sir. Yes, sir. You can.
Aman. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sharif Ekwazam Aman, Professor of English, Government, BL Brijalal College, Khulana, Bangladesh. He has contributed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. In
Yes.
this workshop
Do you
of
hear
pandemic
me?
and emotional configurations, literary
Do
responses
you hear
across time and
me?
space. Thank you, sir, joining us with us. You are really a great academician, scholarly author of many books, and the famous books are River Madhumati and Broken Feather. Thank you, sir. A book of short stories published in London from your side. Great. 4 volumes of Bengali short stories are also again your name. Novel, the saga of pain, I think. The Dohan Katha. I am right in saying, sir. And a translated volume of short stories, an encyclopedia of the dead. The translated novels Poe and the Bluest Eye of Toni Morrison you have translated, and you are very encouraging for your students also for extra curricular activities from time to time. You are not only a good academician, also a good writer and a supporter to the students to promote social awareness programs. Thank you, sir. Really a wonderful experience for us that you are with us. And now I virtually give the platform to you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Please say your blessing to us and share the knowledge.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Good morning, Dr. Sri.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Do you get me? Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
So, can I start?
Yes,
Why
sir.
not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell something here on this great occasion, I think. And my brother Joshing all the time invites me to join a program like this. So thank you very much. So in this pandemic situation, he arranged a lot of webinars, and fortunately, I joined most of the webinars he arranged, and this is the last one. Pandemic and human civilization in literature. This is the topic on which I would like to talk today. In fact, that people are stranded at home, and sometimes we notice a psychological change in their mindset, especially in the kids. I don't know, and like the scientists, when this situation we will overcome. So I would like to start my talk. Pandemic and human civilization reflected in literature. So previous history of pandemic, I would like to touch the previous history of pandemic. The written history of human civilization shows that people on Earth also experience similar attacks of deadly viruses and bacteria in the early ages too. The plague of Athens was an epidemic that devastated the city-state of Athens in ancient Greece during the second year in 430 BC of the Peloponnesian War, when an Athenian victory still seemed within reach. The plague killed an estimated 75,000 to 1 lakh people, around 1/4 of the population, and is believed to have entered Athens through Piraeus, the city's port and the sole source of food and supplies. Then comes the Justinian Plague. In 541, the bacteria called Justinian Plague spread out from Egypt to Constantinople. the capital of the Byzantine Empire. It was named after Justinian, the Byzantine emperor, and spread out in Britain, Germany, France, Spain. The outbreak started when the Byzantine Empire was at the pinnacle of world power. The Roman Empire had been extending the periphery of its power very quickly and unhindered. The sudden outbreak of Justinian Plague stood on their way of making their dream come true. This pandemic caused the fall of Roman Empire. During the pandemic, Christianity took a stronghold on the mind of the people, as that time science was not so developed to find out a cure for the disease. So the civilization started fighting against a pandemic situation only with the belief in God. The third pandemic of the world was Bubonic Plague. In the late Middle Ages, Europe experienced the deadliest disease outbreak in history when the Black Death, the infamous pandemic of Bubonic Plague, hit in 1347, killing 1/3 of the European human population. Some historians believe that society subsequently became more violent as the much more mortality rate chipped life and thus increased warfare, crime, popular revolt, waves of flagellance and persecution. The Black Death originated in Central Asia and spread from Italy to other European countries. Arab historians Ibn al-Wardi and al-Makrizi believed the Black Death originated in Mongolia. Chinese records also showed a huge outbreak in Mongolia in Then came the Great Plague of London. The Great Plague of London, lasting from 1665 to 1666, and it was the last major pandemic of the bubonic plague occurred in England. It happened within the centuries-long second pandemic, a period of intermittent bubonic plague epidemics that originated in Central Asia in 1331. The first year of the Black Death included related diseases such as pneumonic plague, lasted until 1750. The Great Plague killed an estimated 1 lakh people, almost a quarter of London's population in 18 months. The plague was caused by the bacteria, which is louse. Then came the smallpox. The earliest credible clinical evidence of smallpox is found in the description of smallpox-like disease in medical writings from ancient India as early as 1500 BCE, before Common Era, and China in 1122 BCE, as well as a study of the Egyptian mummy of Ramses V, who died more than 3,000 years ago. It has been speculated that Egyptian traders brought smallpox to India during the first millennium BCE, where it remained as an endemic human disease for at least 2,000 years. The smallpox was probably introduced into China during the 1st century CE from the southeast, and the 6th century was carried from one-third of the population. At least 7 religious deities have been specifically dedicated to smallpox, such as the god Shopona in Yoruba religion in West Africa, In India, the Hindu goddess of smallpox, Shitola, was worshipped in temples throughout the country. Then came syphilis. The first recorded outbreak of syphilis in Europe occurred in 494-95 in Naples, Italy during a French invasion. Because it was spread out by returning French troops, the disease was known as French disease. And it was not until 1530 that the term syphilis was first applied by the Italian physician and poet Girolamo Fracastoro. Many well-known figures, including Scott Joplin, Franz Schubert, Friedrich Nietzsche, Al Capone, and artist Edward Mane are believed to have contracted the disease. Then came the cholera. Cholera broke out first in the undivided Bengal in 1817 and then spread out in India, Sri Lanka, Burma, now Myanmar, Indonesia, Thailand by next 3 years. Its second wave hit as a pandemic in 1829 in Europe and America. Its third wave broke out in 1852. The Spanish flu. The Spanish flu, also known as the 1918 influenza pandemic, by the HINI influenza A virus, lasting from February 1918 to April 1920. It infected 500 million people, about a third of the world's population at the time, in 4 successive waves. The death toll is typically estimated to have been somewhere between 20 millions to 50 millions, although estimated range from a conservative 17 millions to a possible high of 100 million, making it one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Now let us see the reflections of pandemic in literature. First, I would like to refer to the Decameron by Italian writer Giovanni Boccaccio. It is structured with a frame story containing 100 tales told by a group of 10 young men and women sheltering in a villa just outside Florence to escape the Black Death which had struck the city. In 1348, the Black Death was ravaged the city, Florence, Italy, whose families have died. Neighborhoods are empty, chaos reigns, and the routines of daily life have been abandoned. In the church of Santa Maria Novella, a group of 7 young gentlewomen gathered to pray and discuss their sad life, hoping to find some way of alleviating their suffering. The oldest of the group, Pampinia, hits on a solution: road tree. So it seems a good idea to get out of a city filled with contagion. In this COVID situation, the word is very much famous in every country, that is the lockdown. There is nothing to do but watch the bodies piled up and hear the news about who died. It was dangerous to stay somewhere where all social and moral controls are gone and people are succumbing to carnal pleasures. Better to live for the village and enjoy the beauty of nature, where the houses are far enough apart that you are not watching your neighbors die every time you look out of the window. So today's situation is very similar. The prevailing medical advice at the time suggested that a healthy air and a cheerful frame of mind could decrease your chances of catching the deadly disease. But the ladies are afraid of traveling alone. After all, women are irrational and fickle, and without a man in charge, they would not be able to get anything done. Fortune is kind in that moment and sends 3 young men of their acquaintance into the church. The ladies seized the opportunity and the young men, and they were ready to go. They don't have to travel far to escape the horrors of the city. And in about 2 miles, they reach a lovely palace where they have arranged to stay. It has all the amenities, ample living space, servants, beautiful gardens, nature everywhere in the form of singing birds, gentle breezes, and clear flowing water. Once they arrive, they realize that all kinds of mischief might happen if they get bored. So they invent a storytelling game of occupying their time. They set the rules, choose a queen to rule them for the first day, and the structure of their 2-week stay is set in motion. The 10 young people spend the next 2 weeks, except for 4 days of religious on a chosen theme. Each day has a new king or queen that chooses the theme and makes arrangements of their meal and entertainment. It's the regimen of storytelling, they say, that refreshes them and keeps them on the straight and narrow path while they are away from the city, so that no one will gossip about them. So then we get another very interesting text, the old text on pandemic, written by Daniel Defoe, the journal of the plague years. And it is written in the first person, mostly non-linear narrative told by protagonist HF, an unmarried settler whose name is only revealed by his signature at the end of the work. The journal is a tale of his experiences during the plague that afflicted London in 1665. The work is thus fiction, but is prepared with statistics, data, charts, and government documents. HF begins by relating rumors that the plague had come to Holland and closely follows the bills of mortality. Certain parishes are affected, but cold weather seems to stave off the worst of the plague during the winter. However, during the COVID situation, we also heard that in the winter season, it hit severely. Though I don't know whether it is true or not, because in this summer is approaching in India, I mean in the Asian countries, and the second wave of COVID has already hit the countries. So, however, in May and June, numbers of deaths begin to swing upward, and HF starts to wonder whether or not he should leave the city. After some debate back and forth, he decides that God wants him to remain. So at the time, belief in God got strong. HF observes that the rich are leaving the city and the poor are being strongly affected by this distemper. He relates how they succumbed to the wills of quack doctors, fortune tellers, mountebanks, and astrologers in their fear and anxiety of the imminent plague. Yes, during this situation, these people and the people of these professions become very much precious to people. What should I say? Then comes The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, the great short story writer. Poe is one of my favorites. A disease known as the Red Death plagues hit the fictional country where the tale is set, and it causes its victim to die quickly and gruesomely. Even though this disease is spreading rampantly, the Prince Prospero feels happy and hopeful. Prospero is the name of the prince of that fictitious country. He decides to lock the gates of his palace in order to fend off the plague, ignoring the illness ravaging the land. After several months, he throws a fancy masquerade ball. For this celebration, he decorates the room of his house in single colors. The easternmost room is decorated in blue with blue stained glass windows. The next room is purple with the same stained glass window pattern. The rooms continue westward according to his design in the following color arrangement: green, orange, white, and violet. The seventh room is black with red windows. Also in this room stands an ebony clock. When the clock rings each hour, its sound is so loud and distracting that everyone stops talking and the orchestra stops playing. When the clock is not sounding, though the rooms are so beautiful and strange that they seem to be filled with the dreams, swirlings among the revelers. Most guests, however, avoid the final black and red room because it contains both the clock and an ominous ambience. At midnight, a new guest appears, dressed more owlishly than his counterparts. His mask looks like the face of a corpse. His garments resemble a funeral shroud, and his face reveals spots of blood, suggesting that he is a victim of Red Death. Prospero becomes angry that someone with so little humor and levity would join this party. The other guests, however, are so afraid of this masked man that they fail to prevent him from walking through each room. Prospero finally catches up to the new guest in the black and red room. As soon as he confronts the figure, Prospero dies. When other party goers entered the room to attack the clocked man, they found that there was nobody beneath the costume. Everyone then died, for the Red Death had infiltrated the castle. Darkness and decay and the Red Death have at last triumphed. Perhaps you have heard, almost everyone heard the name of the plague by Albert Camus. The plague is a novel about a plague epidemic in the large Algerian city of Oran. In April, thousands of rats stagger into the open and die. When mild hysteria grips the population, the newspapers begin clamoring for action. The authorities finally arrange for the daily collection and cremation of the rats. Soon thereafter, M. Michael, the watchman for the building where Dr. Reeves works, dies after falling ill with a strange fever. When a cluster of similar cases appears, Dr. Reeves' colleague Castle become certain that the illness is the bubonic plague. He and Dr. Reeves are forced to content the indifference and denial of the authorities and the other doctors in their attempts to urge quick, decisive action. Only after it becomes possible to deny that a serious epidemic is ravaging Oran do the authorities enact strict sanitation measures, playing the whole city under quarantine. So wearing masks and sanitation measures are not new. We are for the first time become familiar with this, but it is not new. So there is another write-up, The Stand by American author Stephen King. The Stand is a apocalyptic dark fantasy novel, though the full novel is not any pandemic, but a large portion of the novel is on the pandemic. The plot centers on a pandemic of a weaponized strain of influenza that kills almost the entire world population. Now, I would like to refer to Dan Brown, and you are very much acquainted of Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, but the Inferno by Dan Brown is a novel on pandemic, a mystery thriller written by Dan Brown, the famous writer of Da Vinci Code. The Middle Ages began with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire and marched into the early modern period. Dan Brown's Inferno mentions the Middle Ages because of many plagues and monks were owned during this time in attempt to thwart the Black Plague, also known as the Black Death. The last novel we come to know about the pandemic is written by Nobel laureate, Turkish Nobel laureate Orhan Pamuk. And the book was published just a month before, on 22nd March 2021. The name of the book is Knights of Plague. And the book tells the stories of an Ottoman governor, a doctor, and an army major fighting a plague epidemic on a fictional Ottoman island called Minjar. So, about this novel, Orhan Pamuk says, when the pandemic began in 2020, I was in the US for lectures. I flew back to Turkey. When I learned the first coronavirus stories in Istanbul, I thought that those stories were like my stories in the novel. Pamuk said, I had been pondering about this novel for 40 years and have been writing it over the last 4 years, Pamuk told Daily Hurriyat in an interview. So a writer is pondering about 40 years to write a novel. Is it not amazing? So now I would like to refer to some Indian pieces of literature. There are scattered references to epidemics like cholera, the plague, and influenza in Hindustani literature as well. Though I don't get any complete novel on epidemic, but certainly there are scattered references in some of the writings. So noted Hindi writer Phoneshwar Nath Renu's short story Pahalon Ki Dholak, it was written in 1944, set in North India, depicts a gloomy winter night in the countryside during a cholera epidemic. The story juxtaposes the cholera outbreak against the changing socio-political condition in 19th century India. Lutan Singh Pahalwan is the central character of the story. Due to the decline in extravagant regional country culture in 19th century India, which coincides with the cholera outbreak, Lutan Singh loses his sons as well as his own wife. Epidemics find references in works of noted Hindi writer Munshi Premchand's works as well. Premchand's short stories Edgar and Doodh Ka Dam, published in 1934, also make tangential references to cholera and the plague respectively. In a similar vein, noted writer Master Bhagavan Das in his history Plague Ki Udel, published in 1902, explores the fear psychosis in Allahabad during the plague epidemic in the late 19th and early 20th century. The Bubonic Plague, which came to Bombay via Hong Kong and Colombo through the colonial trading route in 1896, created havoc in British Raj. Then I would like to refer to Rajinder Singh Bedi, noted Urdu writer from Punjab, Rajinder Singh Bedi, in his Urdu short story Quarantine, published in 1940, depicts life inside quarantine shelters in India during the Bubonic Plague epidemic of the 1890s. These shelters were hellish, and Bedi points out that people feared being sent to them more than they feared the plague itself. In fact, still it happens in countries. People don't like to go to the 14 days quarantine. They revolt, and sometimes they fled away. Another story that captures the gruesome reality during an epidemic in India in Bivot Show, written by journalist Pandey Bichan Sharma, born in 1900 and died in 1967, a writer noted for his provocative satire and who used the pen name Ugra. He was famous for his provocative satire. The story, written in Hindi, uses the black backdrop of the Spanish flu influenza pandemic of 1918. The Spanish flu did not originate in Spain, but was widely reported in that country vis-a-vis other countries, where there was a media blackout during World War I, which was brought to India by Indian soldiers returning from the First World War. It is told. So then I come to Ahmed Ali. Ahmed Ali was first an Indian writer. Then he, after the partition, went to Pakistan. A moving account of the 1918 Spanish flu, which claimed an estimated 12 to 17 million lives in India, is reflected in Twilight in Delhi. So far I know, Twilight in Delhi, there is an account of partition also. So the Delhi-born author who later migrated to Pakistan talks of how shroud thieves stole sheets from the graves and how grave diggers raised their fees fourfold during the pandemic. They did not bother to see that the grave was properly dug or deep enough or not. They had so many more to dig, Ali wrote. So Suryakant Tripathi Nirala, some writers cope with personal tragedy as well. The Hindi poet Suryakant Tripathi Nirala lost half of his family, including his wife and daughter, in the 1980 influenza outbreak. He described how there were no wooden logs with which to cremate the dead, and how even the Ganga grew heavy and seemed exhausted with its burden of crops, says Trivedi, a scholar of post-colonial and translation studies. Now, I'd like to come to Bengali literature, and there are also some reflections of pandemic in Bengali literature. In Bengali literature, though we do not get any full fiction on the theme of pandemic, we get a lot of references to plague, cholera, smallpox, etc. in the writings of Bengali writers like Rabindranath Tagore, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay, Vibhuti Bhushan, Tarashankar, and Johid Rahan, and so on. So, in Srikant by Sharat Chatterjee, am I taking too much time? In Srikant by Sharat Chatterjee, we notice the reference to quarantine. The narrator was traveling by a ship from India to Burma. He says the ship will reach Rangoon the next day, but at dawn, there was a hue and cry among the passengers. They are uttering a word, quarantine, quarantine. The people are uttering a word misspelled, the quarantine, quarantine. After some times, he became confirmed that the word was quarantine. The Burmese government had decided to keep the passengers traveling by day stranded for 10 days in a remote coastal area where they built some huts encircled with barbed wire. Sharat Chatterjee also focused on the socio-political condition of the Burmese government at that moment. In Aranyok by Vibhuti Bhushan, Chaturanga by Rabindranath Tagore, Anandamot by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Bhatri Devata, Gano Devata, Arogya Niketan by Tarashankar Bandyopadhyay, Putul Nachar Itikatha by Manik Bandyopadhyay, Hajar Bachor Dhore by Johir Raihan. We notice the references to either plague or cholera, but we don't get any complete Bangla novel on pandemic. In a lot of short stories, we also see the references to epidemic. Pandemic and the future world. The world has been changed a lot due to the pandemic effect. The habit, attitude, and the pattern of leading life of human beings also changed. The effect of Black Death are many and varied. Trade suffered for a time and wars were temporarily abandoned. Many laborers died, which devastated families through lost means of survival and caused personal suffering. Landowners who used laborers as tenant farmers are also affected. That means it is analyzed from the economic point of view. The plague had large-scale social and economic effects, many of which are recorded in the introduction of the Decameron. People abandoned their friends and family, fled cities, and shut themselves off from the world. Funeral rites became perfunctory or stopped altogether, and works ceased being done. Some felt that the wrath of God was descending upon man, and so fought the plague with prayer. Some felt the opposite and started being agnostic. They obeyed the maxim, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you may die. So still, we find these consequences because of the COVID-19. Some modern scholars believe that the plague killed up to 5,000 people per day in Constantinople at the peak of the pandemic. According to one view, the initial plague ultimately killed perhaps 40% of the city's inhabitants and caused the deaths of up to a quarter of the human population of the Eastern Mediterranean. In fact, there are some social effects also and some positive effects, we think. Drinking boiled water, habit of cleanliness, maintaining physical distances, though we say social distances, but I have objection against the word. We maintain physical distances, not social distances. Are the lessons we have had from pandemic. The scientists took 30 years to know that the carrier of malaria germ is nothing but mosquitoes. India lost 6.7 million people because of the Spanish flu. 550,000 died in US. Spain's death rate was low, but the disease was called Spanish flu because the press there was first to report it. The flu was particularly deadly for young adults without pre-existing conditions, which increased its economic impact relative to a disease that mostly affects the very young and the very old. So, the recent COVID-19 pandemic has had significant psychological and social effects on the population. Research has highlighted the impact on psychological well-being of the most exposed groups, including children, college students, health workers who are more likely to develop post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and other symptoms of disease. People are locked down at home. they are working from home. Concept of going abroad is gradually being minimized with the help of technology. The social distance and the security, I already said that I have objection against the word, the social distance. And the security measures have affected the relationship among people and their perception of empathy towards others. Cinema and theater halls are closed, so the OTT platforms have come on frontline and doing business. The internet providing companies are expanding their service ranges. Hygiene sense develops as they are wearing masks, cleaning hands, and developing awareness about health. If all these habits retain, it will do good in future. Whether the much dependence on the internet will bring any good or not, only the time ahead will say. Science has warned us that unless we become aware, some dire consequences are waiting for us. So I think that's all for today. I started referring to the short history of pandemic. Then I tried to refer to some instances of a pandemic reflected in literatures. Then I tried to say something about the social economic consequence of the pandemic. So thank you very much. Thank you from my side, and hope your good health and wish a prosperous day in the coming future. Thank you very much.
So thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and delivering such a nice talk. So Prabodji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I am very thankful to our worthy speaker of the second session of today, Dr. Sharif Aman, who have shared their historical preview on different epidemics in the world from time to time, and that is especially literature by Italian writers he has mentioned very nicely, and throw a light on the Indian literature also, along with Suryakant Tripathi Nirwala's contribution in the short story, or Rabindranath, what we can say about the pandemic that is disturbed the whole civilization and disturbed the economic world also to a great extent, especially in our India. The education system is especially disturbed, and there is huge hue and cry on this matter of reopening and of schools or not. That's a really economic loss as well as business loss in the real sense. And thank you, sir, for sharing the literature on smallpox and clinical evidences of smallpox and Spanish flu especially, and how it has devastated the humanity. Thank you, sir, for your
Thank you very
knowledgeable
much.
experience.
See you again.
Yes, morning. Hello. Morning, sir. It was really a very, very excellent, informative discourse. Thank you so much for that. Actually, you have covered all the aspects of literature, and you have given a very detailed description how the pandemics can work as a background of all the forms of literature. You also talked about short story, about other fables, about myths, about everything. A number of short stories actually took place during the different pandemics. You can say since centuries, whenever the pandemics came, there was a birth of new literature. I would just like to mention a little bit more stories. Suppose a story like a life or death situation. There was a story like Border Town, a number of such stories which just take place only because of the pandemics. It was really, really very, very informative and very, you can say, informative discourse.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the aspects of literature as well as other clinical aspects. You also talked about social distance. What is actually social distance? It's really very nice. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, welcome, sir.
Hello.
So over to the president of the session.
Grover sir, if there are any questions you can ask, you please go through the chat box. If there are queries, you just ask them.
There are basically compliments only.
Yes.
Okay.
Informative session. Thank you so much. Nice presentation.
Actually, really, sir, really.
Nice, very nice explanation. Only, you know.
Very informative, excellent discourse. Such remarks are there. He deserves that only, okay, sir? So, Grover sir, I would just like to request to give some information regarding the evening session.
Yes, our evening session will start at
We have the lunch break and other speakers of the evening session so that our
from
participants
12 to 2. There is a lunch break.
according to that set
We
time.
will rejoin at 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. for third session.
Okay.
And 3 to 4 p.m. for the last final session, fourth session of today's.
So this will be the time to end the session, or anything else will go on?
Because we can end the session now.
There is no.
So Professor Sharif, thanks again, and I hope we will keep meeting.
Even we have noted that many participants, they are asking about the feedback link. Please give some information regarding that.
I already sent, ma'am.
Yeah, I can also
Feedback
see.
link is already.
I can see.
I already sent, ma'am. The
link
feedback
is
link
already
sent
there.
only in chat box.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, sir. Welcome.
Okay.
So thanks, Professor Sharif, Jai Singh ji,
Jai Singh, sir.
ji.
Thank you, Amit ji.
So
We will
thank
meet
you,
in
Shubkiran
evening
ma'am.
again. Thanks to all
Thank
of
you, Shubkiran ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
So we will meet at 2 p.m. today.
Ji.
Okay. Thank you.